Welcome to Media Shelf. I'm Jessica, and today we are diving into the world of fiction and talking about why Jessica Fletcher is the ultimate female character. For those who don't know, Jessica Fletcher is the main character on the TV show Murder, She Wrote. It is a classic whodunit mystery revolving around an amateur sleuth. It started in 1984, lasted 12 seasons and 3 movies, and starred Angela Lansbury as Jessica Fletcher. Fletcher is a best-selling mystery writer. She's a widow. Her husband died a few years before the show started, and she has no kids. These kind of traits, being a mystery writer, bestseller, widow, no kids, these are really kind of the basis of her character, of her show, and, kind of why the plots can unfold the way they do. Because she's a best-selling writer, she is often traveling to promote a book, work out details about turning one of her books into a movie, or just doing research in general. She is very well connected. She knows a lot of different people from her travels and through her books and her research. Um, and she has a very large extended family. Her family always gets a giggle out of me because the creators made up for her not having kids by giving her something like 27 nieces and nephews. Um, I saw a family tree once that somebody had actually put together on the internet of all of her nieces and nephews, and it was hysterical. It's these, it's, it's her large network of friends and family, though, that get her involved in the cases that she inevitably solves. Um, Usually, in every episode, somebody is murdered, and a friend, family, sometimes even herself, is accused of committing the murder. And she immediately sets out to prove the local law enforcement wrong, or to find, and to find the killer and prove that her friend, family member herself did not commit the murder. And because she is a mystery writer, and very detailed in her research, she's very knowledgeable about the topic of murder, poisons, ways to kill people, criminology in general. She's very adept at it. So this lends to her both her credibility and her skills that she can bring to the table in solving these crimes. She is based on the character Miss Marple by Agatha Christie. Miss Marple was introduced in 1927. Miss Marple was not the first female detective that the world saw. There was one introduced in the 1800s in a story, in a novel or set of novels. But Miss Marple tends to be the most well known. She was kind of the first big name for a female detective. She is a spinster in England, and she's a bit of a busybody. So I think that's kind of when they say that Jessica Fletcher was based off of Miss Marple, that's kind of, the basis that they took for her. I think Fletcher's personality is a big reason why she is so successful as a character. First off, she's intelligent. I mean, we've been watching TV shows, all last century, where women just more times than not were portrayed as stupid. They were ditzy, sexualized, not portrayed to the best of women's abilities. And there's, just like women in general had to break through barriers. So did the characters. The characters that we watched on TV had to do the same thing. So Jessica Fletcher's intelligent. She is confident. She's also humble. I always liked that about her. I thought it was kind of funny because every so often she'll get law enforcement come to her and ask for her help. That's kind of, she has this credibility that sometimes she's actually approached to help solve a murder. And she's always like, "Oh no, I can't do that. I'm, not good enough. That I'm not a professional." Well, you've been solving murders for like 150 episodes, so yeah, I think you can do it. Um, she is stubborn, so she does have flaws. Um, she's not perfect because no person is perfect, and therefore no character should be perfect. She is very stubborn, and this is both a positive and a negative, for her, in the sense that she when law enforcement tells her to stay out of their business, stay out of the case, she ignores them. And she often, most of the episodes end up with her face to face with the killer alone with a gun pointed at her, and she's explaining why she knows that they did it. Obviously, she's always rescued by cops or someone, in the nick of time. But she frequently gets into dangerous situations because she just doesn't leave things alone. But on the flip side, she also finds out the truth. Because she believes in her friends and family members who've been accused, and herself, obviously, um, because she's stubborn enough to not let go, she always finds the truth. Now, I think a very small flaw that she has, and this was something that kind of always bugged me as I was growing up, because I watched Jessica Fletcher, I watched Murder, She Wrote my whole life. I was born in 84, so I grew up watching her. And it wasn't really until I was an adult when I was able to start kind of putting together all these dots on why she was really so cool. Um, but it kind of always bugged me that she can't drive. And I always thought that was such a anti-feminist thing to do. I thought that was such a cliche, making her not drive. It In the show, they do it up right. I mean, it's funny. She and it's convenient. Um, she oftentimes will end up needing a ride somewhere, and she'll get information out of the person that she's talking that's given her a ride, because she'll talk to him and she gets information about the case. So it plays to the plot very well. And they do they do actually have her drive a couple times, and you kind of realize that she's a bad driver. So, in fact, it gets to the point where you wonder, well, did she not learn because she's bad, or because it was this whole woman thing? Um, but yeah, she ends up being a bad driver, and you probably don't want her on the road anyway. Well, when I was working on this episode, I did start to realize Jessica Fletcher is in her 60s or 70s at the time of the show's start, which was in the 80s. So that means she was probably raised in that time where women didn't drive. They weren't taught to drive. Very rarely did they want to drive. They didn't need to. So that's probably more of a reflection of the time that she grew up, how she was raised. And I think this next trait of hers actually kind of enhances that concept, that she doesn't drive because that's how she was raised. That's the time era she grew up in. Um, and so I understand her not driving now, and it makes me love the fact even more that she adopts technology throughout the show. She does adopt technology into her writing. In fact, for example, the credits of the show start in the first season, show her at a typewriter first thing. She had a trusty typewriter for the first however many seasons of the show. But then by the end of the 12 seasons, it's the 90s. And so computers were on the rise, and she jumps on the bandwagon right away. She takes classes, she has repair people, and the computers actually end up becoming parts of the plots later in those seasons. And so she actually, by the end of the season, the credit actually shows her um, printing out her manuscript on a printer and then, typing on a PC. So she transitions from using that typewriter to the modern PCs and printers. So she adopts technology. And I just think that's fantastic. Especially just since people in general, older people in general, they just are so scared of technology. And so they made her, that was, I mean, she's just a brave person. She's not afraid of change. And um, I think it's kind of a juxtaposition. I don't use that word very often. um, but I think it's a bit of a juxtaposition that she was raised in a time where she didn't drive, but then she fully jumps on the technology bandwagon. I just think that's genius. Now, I am going to, I do want to bring up some other shows with female main characters because I think the world had to be ready for Jessica Fletcher. And I think there's a lot of shows out there, a lot of different styles of shows that really led to the success of Jessica Fletcher's character. I think if they would have introduced her any sooner, would not have worked. So when I was actually creating this episode, when I was doing research and everything, I kept wanting to say Jessica Fletcher was the first that did this, the first that did that. And she really, I kept getting kind of sad because she wasn't the first at anything. She wasn't the first female detective in fiction. She wasn't the first female detective on TV. She wasn't the first female role. She really wasn't the first of anything. Um, the most you could say is that she was the first time an older woman, was the main character in a crime drama. And that's kind of a very long, convoluted thing. Um, so I have to admit, I was kind of sad that she wasn't the first of anything. But as I started researching all these other TV shows, and all these other shows are really cool in their own right. They took some steps for women in their own right. And I started to realize that I think one of the reasons why Jessica Fletcher you know, was such a success as a character was because the world was ready to A, develop her and B, receive her. And I think these shows are steps why. The first one, and I don't think anyone's going to be surprised, is um, I Love Lucy, 1951. Now, I'm going to throw a disclaimer out here. I'm going to focus on the characters, not the actresses. Um, so far, I've talked about Jessica Fletcher, the character, not Angela Lansbury, the actress. And I'm going to keep doing that when we talk about these next shows. I want to make that very clear because I think some of the reasons why these shows were so big was because the actress herself was making great strides and breaking barriers as an actress, right? So Lucille Ball, um, she's got great story history, had a lot of pull with the show, always worth looking into, badass in her own right. But I'm gonna focus on Lucy Ricardo, not Lucille Ball. So Lucy Ricardo, I think her barrier that she broke down was she was not the typical housewife. It was I Love Lucy is a sitcom. In fact, these first three shows that I'm going to talk about are sitcoms. And Lucy Ricardo was not your typical housewife, right? She's married to Ricky Ricardo, who I believe he was a band leader. And Lucy was always trying to get into a scrape, or always trying to make it big in business and ended up getting into some sort of big scrape, right? So she was fun and lovable, and it was just fantastic that you could turn on the TV and watch this woman be absolutely insane. The normal she didn't have to be the normal woman, vacuuming in high heels and pearls. She was able to just, do what basically act how she wanted, which at that time period was fantastic. Um, but on the flip side, as a character, I mean, she's kind of an extreme. She's aloof, she's childlike, she's fairly immature. So I bring this up because Fletcher's really kind of the complete opposite of that. She's very calm, cool, collected, respected. She can be funny, but she doesn't need exaggerated humor as a character to stand out, right? So she didn't have to exaggerate, all of her any kind of chaos. Lucy, again, she's lovable. She she threw that stereotype out the window that she could be as goofy and crazy as she wanted. Um, but it was kind of like an extreme. It was like one extreme or the other. Now, the next show is the Donna Reed show. And again, it kind of plays to that theory of one extreme or the other. So Donna Stone, this was 1958. Donna Stone is the main character, and this was the first time the mother in a household was the main character. They it was they made her intelligent. She was a very intelligent woman. They gave her her own thoughts and opinions, and she had a life outside of home. She was still a housewife, but she went out into the community and did a lot of different things. They gave her feelings. And so this was kind of the first time where they took a housewife and actually humanized her. It was a big deal. That women could see that they could be super women. This, in my opinion, Donna Stone is kind of that. She's kind of that superwoman that you really kind of think everybody wants and wants to be. She can run the household, she can take care of her family, but she can still be a woman and still be a person at the same time. She can do it all. So, a fantastic, fantastic concept. And I just love that they were bold enough to create a character like that. Um, but Jessica Fletcher isn't domesticated. She not in a housewife sort of way. She's very well traveled, independent with her own life, right? And this is where we're gonna start to kind of it's easy to say, why are you comparing them to these shows? Because these characters are so different. But these are the main female characters of the time that led up to Jessica Fletcher, right? So I think it's important to show the show's positives, but also show the difference and maybe why Jessica Fletcher might be, the ultimate character after all these women played their role. So Donna Stone, she's a housewife. Jessica Fletcher is not. She is out there jet setting the world. She's out there having her own life. She still has a house in Cabot Cove, but Donna Stone represents domestication, and to an extent, Fletcher, she kind of represents freedom. The next show, and honestly, this is a favorite. When I was researching this episode, I watched the show for the first time, and I actually like it. I think I will go and binge, the first few seasons. It's the Mary Tyler Moore Show, 1970. Mary Richards is the main character. She's a young independent professional. Again, it's a sitcom as well. Like I said, these first three are sitcoms. Now, this one was the first time that they made the main character a young independent professional. She's not a housewife. She's not married. She doesn't have kids. She is creating her own modern life. And side note, Mary Tyler Moore Show, one of the interesting things about it is it it kind of created sitcoms as we know them today. It was just a whole different style of sitcom compared to, I Love Lucy, the Donna Reed show, and other sitcoms of that time. It was not only a great step for female characters, but it was also a very interesting step for sitcoms in general. Again, that's a side note. I will try not to go off on that tangent. Um, you know what? I will probably do a whole episode on Mary Tyler Moore Show at some point just because I love that. But Mary Richards is this young professional, right? So women up to that point were a little bit older. They were married. They often had to, they often had to have that husband for them to be on screen. They couldn't generally be on screen by themselves. Mary Richards was kind of one of the first ones where she dated, um, but you saw her just becoming a woman, and you get involved in the lives of the people around her, and it was a huge step forward for women's character roles in fiction, for the simple fact that it didn't focus on love or home life. It focused on, the woman finding herself. Now, that being said, Jessica Fletcher, um, she's already established. You don't see her finding herself. From the very beginning of the series, she walks into the room, she knows who she is. And it kind of goes to it kind of goes to the story. There's great stories where you're traveling with the person as they find themselves, and there's some stories where the characters' struggles are not the focus. Um, and that's how Murder She Wrote is. She doesn't have personal struggles. She knows who she is. She is comfortable in her own skin. She is confident in herself and her abilities, right? So we already see this established woman in Jessica Fletcher. And I think that's very strong. I think that is probably one of the biggest things about why she is such an ultimate character. For the next couple TV shows, they are crime based. So those other three shows were sitcoms. So of course I started to wonder if there were any women in crime roles. And there were. This is where you start to get some stereotypes and where you start to get some sad representations of women. So first off, you have Honey West in 1965. Policewoman 1974 and Charlie's Angels in 1976. Now I grouped these three together because these three shows have women in crime, but they're all very sexualized. Honey West was a private detective, but the show's creators, said that he had a envision of Marilyn Monroe when he created her. Um, the actress in Policewoman said she got tired of being in scenes where she was in the bathtub and, she had to answer the phone to go respond to a case. Um, Charlie's Angels, there was just no hold back on the sexualization. Those girls who were in bikinis in every other episode, they were badasses. Okay, so they were secret agents. They, did the martial arts. They all had backgrounds. Like they were trained. All these women were trained in law enforcement or military. They did, give these women their own strong character backgrounds. But then they kind of obviously negated all of that by having them run around in skimpy little bikinis and, oftentimes bad dialogue. Um, so when you so it's really sad that the majority of those crime shows, leading up to Murder She Wrote, leading up to the 80s, it's really sad that yeah, they had women in those roles, but they felt the need to portray them as um ditty or sexualized. I guess that's just how they felt. That was the only way that they could get people to watch women in those roles. Now, obviously, Fletcher is none of those things that those women have. Um, she would not be caught dead in a bikini. She's very classy. She's sometimes still sassy, but she doesn't need to jiggle. There's no jiggling with Jessica Fletcher. Um, she wears muted colors, you know, she there's a lot of times where she wears beautiful stuff, you know, for elegant evenings. There's a couple of her dresses that are just amazing, and I love that she wears them. And she can look beautiful and gorgeous and desirable, but still, you know, it's not like a bikini sexy. It's not like a, you know, you show off every bit of skin sexy. So, they've found a great way to physically represent Jessica Fletcher, um, but still keep her classy. Now, the last show that I will bring up is Cagney and Lacey, 1982. This is kind of one of the first times women were portrayed in crime TV shows and not sexualized, not demeaned. Both women were intelligent. It was a more serious show. This was again, a big step forward and a huge difference compared to, you know, that first show of Honey West, policewoman, you know. Um, it was definitely more serious. They were police detectives. They had their own lives, they had their own opinions. It was kind of a, you know, cultivation of all of those previous shows. But, and this isn't necessarily a fault, I'm just pointing it out, there were two women in the as main characters. Um, they were well rounded together. They had two very different personalities, which writing wise is great. You obviously want your characters to feed off each other. You don't want them to be the same. So that was part of the thing, was they were two very different women, but there were two of them. It was not a show with a single main lead. Fletcher is a very strong character. She does stand alone. She's solo main character, and yes, there are recurring secondary characters throughout the show, and you love them, but they're really just friends. You know, they just add to Jessica Fletcher's life. They don't, they're not, you know, she could still be Jessica Fletcher without them. So Cagney and Lacey, there were two of them. Well, there's only one Jessica Fletcher. Now, all of these shows are great, and I think they are just fantastic steps for women in TV. But I think each of them is still lacking one element as time progresses. And I think the culmination of all of these female roles is why I think they all led up to the success of Jessica Fletcher. They broke down the barrier, they broke down the door, they got the world ready for such a strong character in Jessica Fletcher, from Murder She Wrote. They broke down the door so Jessica Fletcher could walk through. Um, I think it I think the world was ready for her, and I don't think if she would have been introduced any earlier, I don't think she would have been as big of a success. I think they probably would have altered her in some way that would have made her stupid or given her some sort of shtick. Um, I think it's all of these shows that led up to the success of Jessica Fletcher, and as a character, I do think she is the full package. I don't want to take away from any other show. I don't want to say she is better than any other TV show, any other character. I think she is, you know, saying she is the ultimate female character. She is well rounded. She's got some faults, she's got positives. I think she does represent women very well. Um, and as a person, I think she's somebody that we can look up to and want to be. So, I'm curious to see what everybody else thinks after talking about her for, you know, half an hour. Let me know in the comments what you think. Have you seen it? Do you like her? Do you agree? Any other insights that you want to chat about? Put them in the comments. Let's hear them. I thank you for listening to me talk about all this. And I'm going to start getting ready for the next episode. Make sure that we can have another fun topic to look at. I will talk to you guys later. Thanks. Bye.